O'Fallon friends, welcome. So good to be with each of you today. I am so glad you're here. I hope you're glad you're here. And if you're new with us, man, welcome. Before we jump right in today, I want to ask everybody, wherever you are in the room, grab your phone. If you have a phone, if you don't have a phone, talk to your parents. Grab your phone. We're going to show you something today. We're starting a reading plan as a church, and it's just an opportunity for you to read the Bible together with our entire church this summer. The reading is through all four of the Gospels in 90 days. So we're starting it right away, and we're going to, later this summer, be reading through a number of the Gospels, talking about prayer. I want to encourage you to be reading through the Gospels with us. So it's about one chapter a day. It's not super difficult. And as we spend time together, it's a great way to just dig into the words and life of Jesus. So go ahead and scan this QR code. If you would, this will take you to the YouVersion Bible app. If you don't already have YouVersion, you can download it. And this puts you in your church. This is Cornerstone's page for our reading plan, and we'll all be in there together. Anybody who is part of this, you can join at any time, of course, but it'll be great to do that right now and just jump in together with that reading plan. Hopefully, we can do that together. This week is our second week in a series called My Piece of the Pie. As we just saw, we're talking about money, and last week we said that instead of just looking at gaining money in our lives and getting kind of our piece of the pie, we want to realize that we, me and you, each of us, we are a piece of the pie. The work of God around the world, and He is working, the pie is His work, and He gives us, me and you, He gives us the resources and enhances His kingdom through us. And I saw a picture that I thought was relevant to our series. Maybe you're one of the very special people who likes to eat pie like this. Is this you? Maybe that's you. And I love the quote, because nobody tells me what to do. I'm going to eat pie like that. Maybe you are not quite that stubborn, but maybe all of us can relate just a little bit to this, because let's be honest, we don't love being told what to do. We don't love somebody else telling us. We don't love when we have to do something that somebody else came up with. So we tend to look for what is often called confirmation bias. Have you heard of confirmation bias before? Heard that phrase? Confirmation bias. But we'll talk about it in a minute. I heard a story that I think illustrates that. There was a conference speaker, a lady who told a story of a time that she was in a corporate gathering in a large group, and each person in that gathering was assigned a project partner for this thing they were supposed to put together throughout the rest of that day. Corporate event, everybody is in pairs. She was assigned a younger lady as her partner. And a few minutes into their time together, she noticed as she's working with this other lady that she kept noticing this foul stench. And it was like body odor. And it just didn't go away. And pretty soon, she came to the conclusion that she had been paired with a stinky partner. Anybody been paired with a stinky partner before? Most of us have experienced that. She spent the rest of the morning basically trying to hold her breath and breathe through her mouth. And internally, though, she stayed pretty annoyed that she had, unfortunately, out of all the people at this event, drawn one of the people who had not decided to bathe. And at lunch, she went to her car. She's been with this person like 3 or 4 hours. She goes to her car for a little bit of relief and to make a few phone calls. And oddly, what she noticed in her car was that the smell was still there. And that's when she realized it was her. She had mistakenly put on a shirt that she had worked outside in the day before, and it was far from fresh. And as it turns out, she was the stinky partner. Now, on this topic of money, and as we're talking about finances, what you should or shouldn't do with it, what God says about it, here's the reality for each of us to realize, friends. You can think just about anything you want on this topic. You can come to just about any conclusion you want to come to about money. And if you look long enough and hard enough, you will find somebody who agrees with you. You will find somebody to give you the bias that you would like to have. You will find somebody. And as I share God's word with you today, as we talk about God's word and look at what Jesus says, you may even have the temptation to think that I, as I'm sharing this, am the stinky partner. Maybe you even go as far as to say that Jesus is the stinky partner, but there is a chance, and would you just open your heart and mind to the fact that there is a chance that God has something to show each of us, something about the way we look at or handle money that actually needs to grow. It needs to grow in us. We don't need confirmation bias, we need growth. And the best way to approach this topic before God is to look in the mirror, not look for confirmation bias on what we have already concluded and precluded that we know for sure about how we should approach it, all right? So as we jump in, my ask of you is that you would today open your heart and mind to how God might be stretching you into a new place. We talked last week about one of the ways we align our finances to God. We talked about the 80-10-10 plan, the 10% to God, 10% to savings, 80% for us to figure out how to spend. And hopefully, some of us have really considered making a change or taking a step forward in our giving. Maybe perhaps you even did that today. Or if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch that message. Today, we're talking mostly about the heart. None of this stuff really matters about what we do with money or how we handle resources if we don't address what's really going on inside the relationship between money and the heart. Jesus preached a famous sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. Perhaps you've heard of it or read it. It's the longest sermon we have recorded in Scripture. It's recorded in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. And pretty much right in the middle of the sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about money. And this is what he says in Matthew 6, beginning in verse 19. Matthew 6:19. Jesus says this: "Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be." Now, maybe you've heard these verses before. Jesus uses several illustrations here that are pretty easy to understand, pretty easy for us to see. Things rust, or metal rust. Things break. Thieves steal stuff. Pretty much no matter where you live, there's going to be somebody trying to steal stuff. Moths and other insects eventually destroy stuff. Don't ever let stuff, he says, be the primary treasure in your life. I know a lot of times when we talk about treasure, we think treasure chest, money. He says that our treasure should actually be beyond that. Don't let stuff be what you are primarily storing up in life. Instead, says Jesus, make sure your life is more about storing up treasures where? In heaven. Kingdom things in your life should be the primary treasures of your life. Focusing your time and your resources on impacting other people with the gospel should be the focus. He does not say, you are a terrible person if you have a storage unit and you put stuff in it. He does not say that. He actually uses the present tense, stop storing up, saying that the more stuff we have, the more things we collect, the more our focus is on accumulation, the more likely it is that our focus is not set on kingdom things. Doesn't mean that the things are bad. It means that the focus area sort of shifts our heart because we know, Jesus said it, our hearts are going to follow our treasures. And he knows us. He knows us. He knows how it's going to work for us. He knows about the curse that many of us have experienced. Have you experienced the curse of what I call the curse of creep? Anybody experienced the curse of creep? You can already tell what it is. Do you know what the curse of creep is? It kind of goes something like this. You get married. You have basically nothing because you're dirt poor and you're paying student loans. Everything you own fits in your Honda Civic. Do you remember that day when you could drive away from somewhere with everything you owned? And then you buy a house with a carport or something, no basement, but somehow still, 3 years later, when you sell your house and you move, you still need a big old U-Haul to transfer all the stuff you have somehow accumulated. You buy a house with a garage because you kept saying to yourself, I just wish we had a garage to put some stuff in. And then a couple years later, you know what you're saying to yourself then? I just wish we could park in the garage. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get some stuff gone? We could park in the garage. What happened? The curse of creep happened. That's what happened. The very casual accumulation of stuff that has a way of happening to us in life, if we're not aware of it, creep, creep, creep. It's like a weed. It just kind of grows everywhere. And the stuff in the garage, most of that stuff is not bad stuff. It does not make you a bad person if you have stuff in your garage. That is not the point. My struggle, at least the way I wrestle this, is that it seems like to me that it's more affordable and cheaper to keep something than to buy a new one later. So I assume I probably need one of everything just in case the day comes when I might need that thing. Anybody else like that? All right, you just don't know when you're going to need it. So I hang on to some stuff, and I'm not sure that there is a clear formula that fits every one of us cut and dry on this, okay? Because if you have an extra rake, that does not mean you are a sinner. I mean, you are a sinner, but that's not why. There is something to all of this that draws us by the accumulation of things, by this natural and very American thing that pulls us toward material wealth and acquiring things. Jesus says, essentially, be aware of the creep. Because, and there's lots of kinds of creeps, this kind of creep. Because even the subconscious draw, this pull, this magnetism to need more and get more, man, before you know it, it will occupy your heart. Your heart will be sucked in. And where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Essentially, what he's saying is that the priority of your treasure shapes the story of your heart. The priority of your treasure shapes the story of your heart. Where you prioritize your treasure, that's what's going to happen here. And it's not just about what you think Jesus says or what you believe about money. Those things are important, what you come to conclusions on in your head. But what you actually do with it, Jesus says, that is going to shape your heart. What you actually do. Part of the path to having a heart after God, the way so many of us would probably say we would like to make God-honoring decisions in what we do with money. We would like to do things where God blesses us. If we just carry on with letting the draw of accumulation, the natural sort of path of the world we live in, more things, bigger things, better things always reign in our life, our hearts are bound to fall in line. That is the curse of creep. Now, I would suggest to you there are 4 primary ways that we spend money in our lives, all right? Maybe you could find another 1 or 2, just go with the illustration for today, all right? And here they are, okay? First of all, we've got things that we spend money on. We've got things that we have debt. We've got sometimes money we can put into savings, and then we have money that we give. These are kind of the 4 primary buckets. When we do have money, we do these 4 things in life. Maybe we don't do them all, but we do most of them from time to time in life. And we put things into these buckets, right? The spend bucket is often where we start. I'm going to suggest to you today it's a bad place to start, but this is where we typically start because what else do you do with money? You spend money, right? So we start with, the really important people in our family that we want to spend money on. We feed them and stuff, and we got some other important people that we want to make sure we get them the things, the clothes that they need, and pay for all their things that we want to do for them. And whoops, got one more. I guess that one was a whoops. And then we got food for them. We want to make sure that we have all the expenses paid for our food. We got to pay for, we got to pay for this one, right? But we're going to save that one for just a second because that one kind of fits in a different category. But we got to get furniture for our lives. We've got more food. That's a pig. Anyway. We got things we got to spend money on. So we spend and we spend and we spend. And sometimes those things we would call them needs. Sometimes we define our needs as needs, and actually they're wants. We kind of are keeping up. There's a temptation to always want those things to be better, to always want to have more and bigger piece of our pie. Then there's other things that we spend, that you could say we spend on, but it's the category of debt. Now, spend is how we got here, right? But sometimes this bucket overflows into this one. And everybody seems to be telling us that, you know what, it's fine, it's not a problem. It's a very, very low interest rate still, not going to be a big deal. And yet, it keeps creeping up and creeping up. The house typically fits in that category. Maybe we had, more furniture that we had. There's some other things that typically end up in that category because we didn't often pay cash for our car, so put our car in there, and then there's like our other car, which is some version of a Jeep. That goes in there too, and more furniture because we didn't pay cash for that. And there's, on and on and on. And the debt bucket continues to fill up and fill up and fill up. And these two buckets are incredibly demanding. Now, sometimes if we've been really smart or we get a big raise or something, statistics say that that doesn't actually matter that much, but sometimes we put stuff into this category. And maybe this is like a business. Maybe we set aside some money that we want to save for a future endeavor with our business. Or maybe there's, a little bit bigger house than the one that we have. We want to save toward that, so we put some money in for savings. Maybe it's a vacation thing that we want to save toward. This is a tropical fruit. That's what I was going for there. There's some things we want to save for, and that we want to put aside some money for that. I probably ought to put the kids back over here now because got to save for college and all that kind of stuff over here. Sorry, kids. And then there's one last category, and that last category is the giving category. This includes what we talked about last week, the tithing or first fruits, giving our first 10% to God through His church. We set that aside for God. It belongs to God. But it also includes every other generous thing that you'd ever give toward in life. Literally, almost every person I talk to about this topic says they want to put more in this bucket much more often than they actually do. I don't actually have any objects to put in there. Kind of just empty buckets to put in the bucket. It's really hard to ever live this way when the buckets are in this order. Notice what all three of these buckets have in common. They all essentially have to do with exactly what Jesus talked about, which is storing up. A lot of the stuff that goes into these buckets, and they're not bad things. Everybody needs a couch. But Jesus is pretty clear that all three of these buckets should be under the scrutiny that He is talking about. All three have the potential of not only being a resource and a help to us, they all three have the potential of drawing our hearts somewhere that we never intended. And if we want to really heed the words of Jesus and get our hearts in order the way that we would probably say we would really like to, then we've got to choose not to just pray more, not to just care more. Both of those things are good. We care about it, we pray about it, but we've got to actually decide to reorder the buckets. We got to figure out how to reorder them. We actually start with giving God what belongs to God. We actually start with being beyond what we give to God, finding margin in our lives to be generous and actually be giving, and then to save for the future. And then after that, we figure out, I guess, how to spend or pay off debt, depending on what your financial plan is at the moment. And it causes us, even if we don't mean to, that when it's reversed, to put our trust in the stuff and instead of firmly in the hands of God. Friends, money isn't trustworthy. So we are so prone to want more and to feel like we need more. And then we get sucked in. The outcome of that sort of life is what the Bible calls greed. Everybody say greed. When you think of greedy people, you probably think of people who have way more money than what you do. Who's greedy? Well, probably somebody wealthier than you. And sure, there are probably more than a handful of really wealthy people in our world who struggle with greed. I'm sure there are. You could perhaps even reinforce this entire thought that you have with Scripture. Matthew 19, Jesus said, I'll say it again, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. See, there it is right there. Rich people are never going to make it into the kingdom because rich people are greedy. That's what Jesus said. The rich people are the greedy ones. And you think, good news, I pretty much spend all the money I have, so I am not in danger of that at all. Well, not so fast. No matter how you handle your finances, it doesn't mean that all people with some money are not going to go to heaven. In fact, many of the affluent people in the Bible actually did enter the kingdom of God. Abraham, the father of faith, was wealthy. Joseph was the prime minister of Egypt. Job owned seemingly everything you could think of. David was the wealthy king of Israel. Solomon, his son, the king, considered the richest man in the history of the world. The gospel writer Luke was the doctor. Joseph of Arimathea, who financed Jesus' tomb. He was a wealthy dude. We could go on. It isn't the dollar amount that gets you. It is what you do with it and how your heart is aligned regarding money that is the key. And I can tell you that I know some wealthy people who are so incredibly generous. It would shock you if you knew how they gave and what they did. And I know some other people on the lower economic spectrum that are incredibly greedy. It is not just about the economics. Jesus says it's actually about the heart. No one says, you know what, I am really struggling with some sin right now. I'm working through some sin issues, and the main one is greed. I am greedy. No one's ever told me that. Maybe you've heard somebody say before, you know, we have a real greed problem in this country. Just got a bunch of greedy people, which of course means lots of other people have that problem, not us, not me. The problem with greed is that it's tricky. It's not straightforward. It deceptively works its way into our hearts without letting us know that it's there. Greed keeps whispering to you quietly, you know what? You're the boss of your money. It's your money. You deserve it because you work hard. And you need it. You need that thing too. You need that other thing that you've been looking at. And it needs you. It is calling you. It is whispering. And you know what? It grows like a vine all around our hearts. We can be so blinded by it. But don't just take my word for it. All right, in another place, Jesus addresses the danger of greed creeping into our hearts. He addresses somebody who had asked Jesus to help make things right in his father's estate with his brother. He was having a little bit of an inner family issue. I'm sure none of you have ever had that before. But that's what he's addressing in Luke chapter 12. This is what Jesus tells this guy. In Luke chapter 12, verse 15, he says, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you what? Own. Life is not measured by how much you own. See, money isn't the problem. Money is neutral. Money, in fact, can be helpful. Money does incredible things in meeting people's needs all over the world. We can even rightly enjoy money, as it says multiple times in Scripture. That is very possible to do. It is the love of money, the craving, the greed that has a way of settling in our hearts that is so dangerous it pulls us to always need and want more. And Jesus says, beware. Beware. Famous American pastor John Wesley is quoted in saying this, when I have money, I get rid of it as quickly as I can lest it find a way into my heart. I want to get rid of it as soon as I can. I want to make sure that there's no room for that greed, that vine to crawl around my heart. The Apostle Paul, who wrote to Timothy, Timothy was a young pastor, and the instructions Paul writes in 1st and 2nd Timothy for us is a firm warning to Timothy and us about how we handle money. And look at what Paul says in 1 Timothy about money. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. Now look, we established last week who the rich people are. Remember who the rich people are? We are the rich people. Most of us live within the top 4% of wealth in the entire world. Friends, we pay $5 for a cup of coffee, all right? We are globally the rich people. And he warns us for a few things in the very first verse of this passage. Don't be proud, which is thinking too highly of our wealth and our prosperity and that we're doing pretty well. We got a pretty good job. We're living Don't be proud, he says, because after all, remember where all of that came from. All of it came from God. It's all his. And secondly, he says, don't put your trust in that either. Do not put your trust in money or your accumulation or your status. I know a story of a pretty wealthy guy, true story of a pretty wealthy guy who said in reference to this verse, he said, look, I don't put my trust in money. That's not a problem for me. I put my trust in me and my ability to make money because I can make money anytime. He said, I just put my trust in me. And I said, I'm pretty sure that's the same thing. True story, he got laid off the following year from his job, completely out of left field, did not see it coming. He didn't really deserve it, but corporate layoffs. He was putting his trust in himself to make money until he didn't have a job anymore. Friends, money is money. How far money goes, you know what? It's unreliable. It's not stable. Instead, God says, Put your trust in him who richly gives. I will not trust in riches, but in him who richly provides if I'm following Jesus. Paul warns because the lure of money, money promises at least 4 things. There's at least 4 things that money promises. There's probably more. Money promises us security. If I just had more money, then I could do these things. I could feel like I am there. I am secure. I'm going to be good. Bigger house, better school, bigger nest egg, more retirement, pay off more debt, never have to worry about it again. That's what money kind of promises. We have security. Money promises freedom. If I had more money, I wouldn't be stuck. I could get a job I want instead of what I have to do to pay the bills. Finally, I could do some of those things I've always wanted to do. I would have freedom if I just had more money. Money promises us power. If I had more money, I could get the upper hand. More income means now I get to set some of the rules for life, not everybody else. And that is pretty appealing. I would really like to be in that situation. Money also promises us significance. Now, we don't like to admit this one, like we don't like to admit maybe that we're struggling with greed. But for so many of us, it is a subconscious temptation. We want others to see us as successful. We want to feel valued, and money promises value. It's just an endless ladder that never fully delivers on the promise that it offers. And pretty quickly, we only have a perspective. Not only do we have a perspective problem with money, but before you know it and before we really catch it, we have a heart problem. It can be really, really emotional. Money has such a pull on our feelings. We long for security or freedom, power, significance. And so we get sucked into this lure for money and finding our meaning through our finances. And yet, ironically, our stress and anxiety, when we get more, a lot of times it goes up. Because it's not true. Money can't solve the longing in our hearts. Our hearts are not made to be fulfilled by the accumulation of money. Money tends to promise what only God can fulfill. So, we heed the warning. What are we supposed to do about it? How can we make sure that we don't fall into the trap of greed, the pitfall that Paul's talking about? Well, he goes on to say a little bit further in that same passage in 1 Timothy 6. We read verse 17, now look at verse 18. Tell them, he says, giving them the warning, but tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. God doesn't want us to catch the vision of getting. Friends, he wants us to catch the vision of giving. Literally, the antidote in Scripture to letting greed creep into our hearts is to intentionally give. And notice that there's some actions in that verse. He says, do good. He says, be rich in good deeds. Be generous. Be willing to share. They all have to do with other people outside of us. They are all about giving. The opposite of store up is give away. He's saying let your life be about impacting others even when it comes to your money and your stuff that technically is God's money and God's stuff. And look at how he describes it. Always be ready to share with others. And then he puts the responsibility on who? The responsibility is on the giver. So often, we feel like this. I know you felt like this. I felt like this. If I knew there was a need, if I just knew that need was there, I would have stepped up and helped that neighbor or serve the church or whatever it is. I just didn't know there was that need. And that's sometimes true. We can't do things if we don't know what the need is. But there is a responsibility in this passage and many others that the responsibility is placed on the giver. The giver's got to be ready and willing to share. When you're ready to share and willing to share, you go looking for ways to bless others, keeping our eyes open for the potential of the need, asking the questions about perhaps where we can actually help meet a need, not only with our money, but with our material possessions and our lives as well. And sometimes it is as simple as making sure that you are consistent in your giving here at church. Just be consistent. Make sure you're doing the things you need to do to be consistent or increasing your giving. That's one way to be a better giver, is to give more. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. Now, there are always needs through your church, okay? 100% of the time when you give to your church, you are giving to help meet needs, because that's what we do as a church. We meet needs for so many people. Your giving, for example, this summer helps pay for lunches that are going out every single week to families in our community who are in need of food for their kids. They get food through the school during the school year. We provide it during the summer when they're not in school. That is one of the beautiful things about giving to the church, is that together we can meet all kinds of needs, like for our whole community, that we couldn't do on our own. Sometimes, perhaps it's more specific, like our invest wall that we do as Cornerstone, we do in the winter to prepare for the upcoming summer camp season. We have a couple hundred kids who are launching out into camp very soon. Some of our kids and some of the ones who are new to us and who are invited to share, they're invited their friends, they can't cover all the costs, which, like everything else, just keep rising. So those of us who are able, we help bless them, and many of you are part of that. Thank you. We are ready to share with others. We use our money to do good, like Paul said. Sometimes it's transporting kids around on our own, paying for their meals and opening up your home to other people, inviting college kids from church out to lunch on Sunday, paying for their meal. There's so many ways. Being intentional like that and looking for ways to bless, that honors God and blesses other people, and frankly, pushes the lure of greed out of your life. Verse 19, Paul says this to wrap it up. By doing this, by being really intentional like that, by doing good with your money, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. I love the wording because it goes right back to what the opposite of what Jesus said. You want a firm foundation? You want to know what you can really count on for the future? Your nest egg? You want to have really an experience in your life that's the best life you can live for you and your kids, your grandkids, your friends? It's not going to happen by spending a bunch of more money on more stuff. It's all short term. Paul says it so clearly. You want to experience true life, be more giving. And give more stuff away. Support more ministry. Be active in loving a neighbor more. Be a giver. You want to release the grip of greed and find freedom? You want your heart to be aligned with God's heart and not wrapped up in the lure of money? Give. The only way to kill the weed of greed is to surrender our hearts to God, letting Him influence our hearts, becoming active and intentional givers. Now, I cannot give you a perfect formula for this, right? It's really more of a challenge that God gives us to really prayerfully consider, and that there is not an exact one size fits all. There's not. God doesn't just set, He doesn't set it up that way. He tells us where to start. He says give 10% out of the top to God. It belongs to Him. But after that, you got to prayerfully determine what that looks like. But I can assure you of one thing. If that causes you to ask something like, all right, what's it going to cost? What's the amount got to be? Just let's get it over with. There's likely a heart issue, something that needs to be addressed. It is not about what we have to give, but frankly, what we get to give, to constantly be pushing back the lure of greed and promoting forward the love of Jesus. What kind of giving today would help you to, as Paul said, experience true life? Here's a few questions just to ponder as we kind of wrestle this down today. Now, I want you just to maybe write these down. Maybe take a picture of the question and really talk about it later. Really think and pray about it. First of all, which of the false promises of money is the most tempting for you? Security, freedom, power, significance. Which of those is the most tempting to you? That really calls out to you. If you identify that, you're a good step in the right direction with freeing your heart, with having an influenced heart for God. Number two, how wrapped up are you today in terms of the lure of money? Now, that's a really pointed question that you have to answer for yourself, right? Give yourself a 1 to 10. How wrapped up do you feel like you are? If you were honest with yourself. Number three, what is one specific step you need to consider in order to push back against the temptation of greed in your life? What is one thing you can do today to push back against the temptation of greed? And as we pursue that together, friends, the blessing of God is going to come when we get the bucket straight. He promises joy on the other side, freedom on the other side, and greed can be pushed out of our hearts. Let's pray. Lord, it's because of you and all of your blessings and all of your gifts that we even have these conversations. We wouldn't be able to do it without what you've given us first. Lord, would you just mold our hearts today? God, really, that's our prayer. Mold our hearts. Convict us in the ways we need convicted about how we look at and handle money. Shape our hearts more like Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen.